In the quiet heart of medieval England, in a village called Woolpit, the summer sun once revealed something no one could explain. Two children who were green. Yes, green. Their skin was tinted like fresh leaves after rain. Not pale, not sickly, but unmistakably green. They were frightened, confused, speaking in a language no one understood, and no one knew where they came from. It was the 12th century, sometime during the reign of King Stephen, or perhaps King Henry II, the records are unclear. But the villagers of Woolpit, nestled in the Suffolk countryside, would remember this moment for generations. They said the children were found near one of the village's wolf pits, deep traps dug to capture wolves that threatened livestock. Hence the village's name, Woolpit. When the harvesters found them, the boy and girl appeared disoriented, as if lost in a world not their own. Their clothes were made of unfamiliar material, coarse yet finely woven in a strange pattern. Their speech was unintelligible, no dialect known to England at the time. And yet, the most unforgettable thing was their color. Their skin bore a greenish hue, as if they had emerged from the earth itself. Some said they looked like forest spirits. Others, that they were sick children abandoned by desperate parents. But as the villagers tried to speak with them, it became clear they weren't from anywhere nearby. They didn't recognize the food offered to them. They refused bread, meat, and milk. For days they wouldn't eat, until someone brought freshly cut green beans. That was the first thing they ate. They opened the stalks and ate the beans inside raw, as if it were the only thing they'd ever known as food. Over time, the villagers took them in, caring for them, trying to communicate. The boy, weaker of the two, grew ill and eventually died, but the girl survived. She gradually learned English and began to tell a story that made the villagers' blood run cold. She said she came from a place where everything was green. The sun never shone brightly, and twilight lingered forever. There, everyone looked like her and her brother. And one day, they had followed the sound of bells, wandered into a strange cave, and suddenly found themselves in a blinding light. When they stepped out, they were here, in Woolpit. It sounded impossible, but she insisted it was true, and that is where the mystery of the Green Children begins. To understand how such a story could emerge and survive for centuries, we need to step back into the world of 12th century England. This was a time of turmoil. The land had just endured a brutal civil war known as the Anarchy, fought between King Stephen and Empress Matilda. Villages were ravaged, famine stalked the countryside, and superstition ruled where science could not. In places like Woolpit, everyday life was bound by religion, fear, and folklore. People believed in omens, spirits, and signs from God. Strange lights in the sky were seen as messages. Crop failures meant divine punishment. And green, the color of nature, was also the color of the otherworldly. To medieval villagers, the Green Children were not just strange, they were symbols. But this wasn't just a fireside story passed among peasants. The tale was recorded by two respected chroniclers, William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall, both monks, both historians. William of Newburgh, writing in Yorkshire around 1189, described the children as of a green color, differing in nothing else from other humans. Ralph of Coggeshall, closer to Woolpit, added more detail about their language, their refusal of food, and the strange tale told by the surviving girl. These weren't rumor mongers. They were among the most trusted recorders of England's history. So, if they wrote it down, we must ask, did they believe it? William, cautious but curious, suggested perhaps it was a marvel of nature. Ralph, more mystical, implied it might be divine punishment or a sign from another world. But the consistency of their accounts is what keeps historians awake even today. 2 independent sources. Same story, 2 green-skinned children. A girl who survived and said she came from an underground land. Centuries later, the mystery remains. Were these simply lost, starving orphans, or witnesses to another reality? As the story spread across medieval Europe, it evolved. Some said the children were from the land of Saint Martin, a Christian paradise below the earth. Others whispered that they were fairies, beings from another realm who wandered too far from home. But one detail never changed: the green color, the strange language, and the claim that they followed the sound of bells and ended up in our world. The girl who survived came to live in the home of a knight named Sir Richard de Caen in the nearby village of Wykes. There, she slowly adapted to life in England. It wasn't easy. She was restless, often frightened by sounds others ignored. Church bells, the barking of dogs, even the voices of men. She didn't understand customs, prayers, or even sunlight. To her, daylight was painfully bright. But over the months and years, her skin began to change. The green faded. Slowly, the hue of leaves gave way to the pink tone of ordinary human skin. She learned English, learned to eat normal food, and eventually she began to speak of her old home. Her story was otherworldly. She said she came from a land where the sun never shone. It was always dim, like twilight. The light was soft, greenish, as if filtered through leaves or mist. All the people there were green like her. They lived underground in a land called Saint Martin's Land. When asked how she and her brother arrived in Woolpit, she described wandering near the edge of their fields, where they heard the sound of bells. Curious, they followed the sound into a cave. They walked and walked through darkness until they reached a light at the far end. When they stepped through, the light blinded them. And when they could see again, they were in the fields near Woolpit. They tried to go back, but couldn't find the entrance. The villagers listened in silence. Some crossed themselves in fear. Was she describing another world, an underground realm? Or had she simply been confused, a traumatized child weaving a story she barely understood? Whatever the truth, her words spread. And so did the legend. While the girl adapted, her brother did not. He was younger, weaker, and refused food for too long. Within months, he fell ill and died. The villagers buried him in consecrated ground, but some whispered he should have been laid elsewhere. After all, what if he wasn't human? The girl, however, grew stronger. She eventually lost her strange hue and became, in all outward appearance, like everyone else. But those who knew her said she was different inside. She was described as very wanton and impudent, meaning she spoke freely, boldly, even scandalously for a young woman of that time. She seemed detached, as if she didn't fully belong in this world. Some records say she worked for Sir Richard for many years. Others claim she later married a man from King's Lynn, possibly even becoming the wife of a royal officer. But her story and her green skin would never be forgotten. Centuries later, the question still echoes. Who were the Green Children of Woolpit? Were they human or something else? Over time, countless theories have emerged, each offering a glimpse of possibility but none providing a perfect answer. Let's explore the main ones. The most widely accepted explanation among historians points to a real-world tragedy. During the 12th century, England was home to many Flemish settlers, people from Flanders, modern-day Belgium. They came for trade and farming, but faced violent persecution during King Stephen's civil wars. Some were massacred, others fled into the forests. The Green Children, some suggest, could have been Flemish orphans whose parents were killed. Lost and starving, they may have wandered through the dense woodlands into Woolpit. Their strange language, possibly Flemish or Dutch, which no English villager would recognize. Their odd clothing, simply foreign fabric. Their diet, they might have been starving, malnourished, hence their greenish skin, a sign of chlorosis, a type of iron deficiency common among the poor. It fits the facts, mostly. But then there's her story. Why would a young girl invent a tale about an underground twilight world? Why did she and her brother emerge near the village's wolf pits, deep, dark holes in the ground? And why were they afraid of sunlight if they'd lived on the surface all along? Even the Flemish theory leaves gaps that logic can't fill. Others believe the children's words were literal, that they truly came from beneath the earth, a hidden realm bathed in dim light, populated by beings unknown to us. In medieval Europe, tales of underground civilizations were common. The Celts spoke of Anon, a shadowy underworld. The Greeks had Hades, and Christian monks wrote of purgatorial lands beneath the soil, where souls wandered in twilight. Could the children have emerged from such a place? It sounds far-fetched, but to the people of the 12th century, it was possible. The earth, to them, was a layered world, heaven above, hell below, and sometimes something in between. Even modern paranormal researchers revisit this theory. They point to similarities with later folklore. Stories of people who vanish into hills or emerge from caves with strange clothing and pale skin. The Green Children might have been early evidence, they say, of a parallel world, a world that occasionally touches ours. And then, there's the idea that brings modern ears to attention: aliens. Some believe the Green Children weren't from under the earth, but from the sky. They appeared suddenly, confused by the brightness of the sun. They couldn't eat normal food. Their skin had a strange hue, and they spoke a language unknown to mankind. Could they have been visitors from another planet, accidentally stranded on Earth? It sounds like science fiction, but when you listen to the girls' own words, it's unsettling how they fit. We heard the sound of bells, and we followed them into a cave. When we came out, we found ourselves here. Replace cave with craft, light with portal, and the story suddenly feels very modern. UFO researchers in the 20th century drew direct parallels between the Woolpit case and modern alien encounters. Beings who emerge disoriented, unable to eat Earth food, often described with tinted skin. It may sound unbelievable, but then again, so does the story itself. Not all mysteries are meant to be taken literally. Some scholars believe the Green Children were never real, that their story was a morality tale, symbolic rather than factual. In this view, the children represented the strangers in faith, pagans, non-Christians or outsiders, entering the light of Christianity. Their green color symbolized spiritual ignorance. Their journey from darkness to daylight represented conversion and salvation. The boy's death and the girl's adaptation symbolized the trials of faith. To medieval chroniclers, it may have been less about aliens or hidden lands, and more about metaphor. But there's one big problem with this theory. Both William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall insisted it was a true event, not allegory, and these were serious men, historians, not poets. So if it was fiction, why did they record it as fact? A newer idea among fringe theorists suggests something even stranger, that the children came from a parallel world, a dimension close to ours, but slightly out of sync. The sound of bells could have been a resonance between realities. The cave, a thin place, a rift where two worlds briefly met. If true, it would mean the children were travelers between realities, stepping through by accident, then trapped here forever. There's no evidence for such a phenomenon, but then again, there's no proof that it's impossible either. And when you consider how often similar stories appear across Europe, across centuries, it's hard not to wonder if the Woolpit children were just one chapter in a much larger pattern. Even today, nearly 900 years later, the story refuses to die. Historians still debate its origin, folklorists still study its language, and believers still insist something extraordinary happened that day in Woolpit. A quiet English village became the stage for one of the strangest tales in recorded history. Two children emerged from nowhere, carrying the color of another world. Centuries passed. The story of the Green Children lingered in manuscripts, whispered in folklore, and occasionally surfaced in collections of the supernatural. But it wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries that researchers began to study it seriously, blending history, anthropology, and even psychology to uncover what might have really happened in Woolpit. Modern historians approach the story carefully. They began by verifying the primary sources. William of Newburgh, who wrote about the event around 1189. Ralph of Coggeshall, an abbot who recorded his version a few years later. Both men lived in the same century as the supposed event. Both were respected chroniclers who collected eyewitness accounts rather than myths. Their texts differ slightly, but they agree on the core facts. Two green-skinned children appeared near Woolpit, speaking an unknown language and refusing to eat anything except raw beans. That shared consistency across independent sources is what keeps historians interested. Still, the question remains: how could such an event have occurred without leaving any other trace? No burial records, no other witnesses, no physical evidence, nothing. It's as if the children appeared and then vanished from history as mysteriously as they arrived. In the 1970s, scientists began proposing medical explanations for the children's strange appearance and behavior. The most prominent one was chlorosis, a condition caused by severe iron deficiency. It gives the skin a greenish or pale yellow tint and was sometimes called the green sickness in medieval times. Children suffering from starvation, malnutrition, or heavy metal poisoning could easily develop this look. If the two siblings had been hiding underground or surviving on limited food, their green hue might have been the natural result of illness, not magic. There's also the theory of arsenic poisoning, which was common in medieval England due to contaminated water and soil. Exposure to arsenic can cause green pigmentation, neurological confusion, and loss of appetite. Could the children have escaped from a nearby mine or settlement where arsenic exposure was high? If so, their mysterious underground land might not have been mythical, but literal. Perhaps they lived near subterranean tunnels or mines, disoriented and traumatized when they emerged into the open world. The truth may have been scientific, but to the people of the 12th century it was nothing short of a miracle or a curse. Some researchers focused on the children's unknown language. Could it be identified through surviving medieval dialects? Unfortunately, neither chronicler wrote down the actual words they spoke, only that it was unlike any known tongue. Still, linguists have proposed possibilities. If the children were Flemish, their dialect might have sounded alien to rural English villagers. If they were from Wales or Cornwall, the Celtic tongue might have sounded equally foreign. It's possible that the language mystery was simply a case of mutual incomprehension. And yet, even if the villagers didn't understand their words, how did the children survive for days before being discovered, lost in a foreign land, speaking to no one? Unless, of course, they didn't belong to any known land at all. Some modern psychologists interpret the Green Children as a kind of collective medieval trauma, a story born from a population haunted by war, famine, and death. Children appearing from nowhere, speaking a strange language, could represent the fear of outsiders or the hope of the miraculous. Others view it as a memory distortion, perhaps based on a real event, exaggerated through retelling. A pair of orphans might have wandered into Woolpit. The green could have been metaphorical, or simply misinterpreted over generations. But there's always something that doesn't fit. Even centuries later, scholars admit the story refuses to shrink into pure logic. It remains too vivid, too strange, and too consistent for complete dismissal. Which brings us to the modern era, where the mystery has taken on an entirely new form. Today, Woolpit is a quiet village, the kind of English countryside place where nothing unusual ever happens. But if you visit, you'll find that the Green Children are everywhere. A village sign depicts two small figures with green skin. Local shops sell postcards and souvenirs featuring their image. And each year, curious travelers stop by the village green, asking the same question asked for 900 years. What really happened here? The story of the Green Children has inspired generations of writers, artists, and researchers. In the 19th century, it appeared in collections of English fairy tales. In the 20th century, it inspired science fiction and fantasy authors, from Herbert Reed's The Green Child to modern documentaries on parallel worlds. Even music and theater have retold their story, each version changing slightly, but always circling the same haunting image. Two children emerging from the earth, colored by the light of another world. The legend has become more than a mystery. It's become mythology, and perhaps that's why it endures. Because it speaks to something deep within us, the idea that beyond our familiar world there might exist others, worlds just out of reach, sometimes brushing against ours in strange, fleeting moments. In recent decades, as scientists explore quantum physics and the multiverse theory, the story of Woolpit feels strangely modern again. If reality can contain multiple dimensions, parallel universes layered like pages in a book, then the idea of two children slipping through from one world to another doesn't sound so impossible. Maybe, just maybe, Woolpit was one of those thin places, a moment when the veil between realities flickered, and two lives, innocent, lost, and alien, crossed over by mistake. No matter how many times the story is retold, the same haunting questions remain. Where exactly did they come from? How did their skin turn green? And why did it fade? What became of the girl after she grew up? And most of all, what truth lies behind her tale of a twilight land? Was she describing another country, another world, or something humanity still doesn't understand? Every theory fits part of the puzzle, but none completed. And maybe that's the point. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to remind us how little we truly know. Imagine, for a moment, walking through the fields of Woolpit today. The wind moves through the grass. The wolf pits are long filled in, but the ground feels old, heavy with stories. And maybe, if you stand there at dusk, you'll hear something. A faint sound, a whisper, like bells, ringing in the distance. And you might wonder, just as the villagers did nearly 1,000 years ago, what lies beyond the edge of our understanding? Are there still green children waiting to be found? Or have we simply forgotten how to see them? This has been Mystery Fact File. If you've enjoyed exploring the legend of the Green Children of Woolpit, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another story from the shadows of history. Now, it's your turn. What do you think happened in Woolpit? Were the children real, or a legend that grew over time? Drop your theory in the comments below. And remember, every mystery hides a fact, and every fact hides a deeper mystery. Until next time, this is Mystery Fact File, signing off.